I woke up to the sterile scent of alcohol and distant beeping. The room was quiet, too quiet for a hospital in the middle of Dallas. Late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. My throat burned like I had swallowed nails, and every muscle in my body protested as I shifted slightly. I was still hooked up to monitors, wires trailing across my chest like some kind of human marionette. It hit me then. I had done it. The kidney transplant was over. I blinked hard, trying to shake off the anesthesia's fog. I had waited over a year for a match. The donor list felt like a cruel joke most days. I'd almost given up. But somehow it happened. Surgery, recovery, silence, no balloons, no flowers, no voices I recognized. Just the cold hum of machines and the ache of being invisible to the people who shared my blood. My family should have been here, but they weren't. No surprise there. Being the youngest always meant being the last to be remembered. I was trying to keep my breathing steady when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. A name lit up the screen. Trina, my sister. I answered without thinking. Hey. Oh, you're awake? Her voice was casual, too casual. They said you'd be out for another few hours. I'm awake now, I said, hoarse. She laughed like it was no big deal. Well, anyway, we just finished signing the papers. The villa's finally sold. The room tilted. I gripped the side of the bed to steady myself. The villa? Yeah, the one up north. Big house, you know. Thought you knew already. I didn't say anything for a beat too long. My mind spun so hard I thought I'd vomit. She kept rambling. Anyway, it's a done deal. Pretty good price too, considering the market. I forced a smile she couldn't see. That's good. Thanks for the update. She said something else, but I'd already stopped listening. The call ended with a lifeless, "Take care." I stared at the ceiling like it held the answer. That villa wasn't just a building, it was everything. 10 years of side hustles, late nights, cautious investment. My mother's last wish to me whispered in a hospice bed, "Keep something for yourself. They take and take." I did. Quietly, legally, in my name, but not really. It was wrapped in a trust, shielded by a holding company, buried under layers. Even a probate lawyer would need weeks to decode. Not one soul in my family knew the truth. They always assumed it belonged to our father. He was the kind to make noise about things. I wasn't. I stared into nothing as pieces fell into place. Trina's weird questions about property law a few months ago. The family Zoom calls where estates came up but never landed on specifics. The way my older brother joked about clearing out the old stuff without ever saying what stuff meant. It wasn't a mistake. They planned this. They found a way in. Maybe a forged power of attorney. Maybe they used my being unconscious as a loophole. Whatever it was, they'd been working on this for months. I looked at the nurse's station light. How much did they know? Were they told to keep me sedated longer? Were they in on it? I didn't know where the betrayal stopped. And that was the part that cut the deepest. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone back. I just sat there, breathing in the betrayal like it was medicine being pumped through the IV. They sold the house, I whispered, but they don't know what I actually own. I dragged the tray table closer and reached for my laptop. It was heavy with dust. Hadn't touched it in months. But inside was everything. Ownership contracts, company structures, backup files, encryption keys. Click by click, I unlocked layers they didn't know existed. I wasn't going to confront anyone, yet. Not until I had it all. Every lie, every forged signature. Every conversation, they think they've won, but they just lit the match. The nurse gave me a ride home, more out of hospital policy than kindness. I didn't say much. The air was thick with leftover anesthesia and silence, and the car ride was filled with nothing but the soft whir of the wheels against the road. When she dropped me off at my apartment, I nodded my thanks and let the door shut behind me. It was early evening. Spring light stretched lazily across my living room floor as I stood there, leaning against the doorframe like a man who'd forgotten what his own place looked like. My legs were shaky, but my mind was sharper than it had been in days. The meds helped with the pain, but what I really needed was clarity. I walked slowly to the couch and sat, watching dust particles float through a slice of sun. The place was exactly as I'd left it. Quiet, sterile, not a single message on the counter, not even a welcome home text. I remembered what my mother once said during one of those conversations you don't realize matters until it's too late. She said, "Silence is how people tell you who matters." So I opened the windows. The air felt new, brighter. I needed that, to feel like something in the world was still honest. After resting for a few minutes, I dragged myself over to the small wooden chest under my bookshelf, pulled the key from the taped underside of a kitchen drawer. It took some effort, but I opened the chest and pulled out my old laptop, black, dented, taped near the hinges. But inside, it held the truth. I powered it on. The fan whirred to life like it was waking from a long nap. A few passcodes later, I was staring at folders most people wouldn't know existed. Years ago, I had prepared for the worst. Not because I thought this would happen, but because I'd seen how people like my siblings moved when they smelled blood in the water. Inside one folder labeled Tempura Holdings, I found the chain of ownership that led to the villa. It was all there. An LLC I had registered using the name of a college friend, shell accounts, cloaked signatures, legal, quiet, completely within my rights. I had done it to protect my share, my mother's wish. I didn't think I'd have to prove I owned it someday, but here we were. Then I opened a fresh browser tab and pulled the deed recently recorded with the real estate office. It had been filed just days ago. I downloaded the documents. Side by side, I compared mine and theirs. The signature wasn't mine. The notary was different. The timestamps didn't match. They had created a trail that looked official, but they didn't know I kept the originals. It wasn't even close. I sat there for a minute, stunned at how surgical the betrayal was. They hadn't asked. They hadn't even lied to my face. They just erased me, like I didn't exist. I remembered how Quentin asked me about notaries 6 months back. Said something like, "You ever use one of those mobile ones?" I thought he was talking about refinancing. Now I knew he was laying the groundwork. "They didn't just take something," I muttered. "They erased me from the story." I didn't rage. That would come later. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled through until I found Cassidy's number. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe years, but I knew she'd answer. She did. "Hey, stranger," she said, warm as always. "I need a hypothetical," I said. "Let's say someone sold property, and the actual owner never signed anything." There was a pause. Then, "Whose property?" "I'll send you something. Documents, originals, and a copy of what they filed." "Email?" "No, I'll overnight it. Encrypted drive. You'll know the password." Cassidy was quiet for a beat. Then, the voice I remembered from college came through clear. "Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs receipts." I hung up and began printing. Every file, every timestamp, every notarized line. I pulled out folders and started labeling them. Property, medical, journals. I moved slow, but my hands were steady. In between filing, I walked myself back through every interaction with my siblings over the past 6 months. The phone calls, the skipped questions, the offhand comments. Things that didn't matter back then now felt like blinking red lights. I stared at the ceramic mug on the shelf, the one from Mom's last Christmas. Still there, still unused. Just watching. I could confront them. Now, demand answers, yell, accuse, tear the whole house down. But that would be emotional. This wasn't about emotions. This was about making sure they never got to do this again. The next time I hear from them, I'll let them speak first, so I can see how deep the lie runs. My phone rang just as dusk settled, Quentin's name showing. I paused, fingers trembling over the bed rail. Months since I heard from him, since I felt that weight in his voice. When I answered, he was soft. "Hey, how are you doing?" He sounded concerned, almost human. That's the problem. Concern from Quentin always meant something else. He offered to drop by, just for a chat. My gut twisted. Something about that offer felt off. Warmth, masking threat. I remembered what my therapist once said. People who betray you don't fear losing you. They fear losing control over you. I gripped the phone and listened, letting his voice paint calm, while I watched every inflection for a clue. I acted careful. Too sick, I said. Too tired. But I steered the conversation, asked about real estate, inheritance, asked what we all agreed meant when Mom's will was discussed. Quentin hesitated, then mentioned, Mom and Dad only did what they thought was best. We all agreed. The words dropped like stones. I turned on recording on my landline, something I'd installed long ago for meetings, for backup. After the call ended, I sent the file to Cassidy. I waited. She dug into it, played it back, slowed it down. She noted guilt in the pauses, the way Quentin's tone stiffened, the soft laugh when I pressed questions. She said it might be admissible under Texas law. She suggested building a timeline with everything we had, documents, deeds, emails. Then something from Madeline whispered in my mind, a text I barely read when I was groggy before surgery. Don't trust what they say about the house. Just rest. At the time, I dismissed it. Now I wondered. I dug through backups. Some texts had vanished. Some voicemails gone. I messaged Madeline. You once tried to warn me. Please don't let silence win this time. She replied hours later. That night, Madeline called. Her voice was fragile. She admitted she tried to stop Mom and Dad from finalizing the sale, but they told her I was too sick, too fragile, that I wouldn't understand, that she felt guilty for pretending everything was fine. She apologized. I'm sorry for being weak when you needed me to be strong. I felt vindicated and raw. The betrayal of siblings feels like a burn inside. It's not just what they did, it's what they assumed I wouldn't see. Late that night, a legal envelope was slid under my door, sealed, thick paper, from a law firm I've never heard of. Inside, a cease and desist letter. It calls me out for harassment and defamation. Signed, Quentin Voss. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my breath caught. They want me silenced before I speak truth. They want me to stop, but I won't. It was nearly midnight. I sat alone at the kitchen table, eyes blurry from rereading Quentin's message transcripts. That call played in my head on loop, but something felt off. I opened my text backup app, pulled yesterday's snapshot. There it was. Trina's message. We all signed. That short line hit like a punch to the ribs. I flipped back to today's archive. Gone. Just gone. Someone deleted it. Not by accident, not a glitch. That message was proof, and now it was missing. Rage didn't roar, it chilled. That kind of cold fury you only feel when you know someone looked you in the eye and erased you anyway. I called Magnus Rowe the next morning, scheduled a virtual meeting. We'd worked together on some trust documentation years back, so I figured he might have touched the villa paperwork. He answered with the same polished tone he used at every holiday dinner when pretending not to judge us. I wasted no time. I need clarity on a document you may have reviewed, a power of attorney I never saw, and a real estate sale I never signed off on. His posture stiffened. This might be a misunderstanding. I wasn't handling your personal portfolio directly. Don't stall me, Magnus. He paused. I was told it was all above board, standard forms, family consolidation. You notarize anything? No. I assumed it had already been done. You assumed wrong. I stared at him through the screen until he looked away. His words were full of cushions. Maybe, possibly, I thought. But his eyes told me he knew. Not the full crime, but enough to keep quiet. Later that evening, I opened an old folder marked Silas Crow. Just the name gave me heartburn. Silas wasn't blood, but he'd always hovered around us like a cousin who never left after Thanksgiving. He went to college with me, back when I was barely acknowledged by my own last name. I flipped through old photos, yearbooks, emails. There it was, his 2006 message after a family function. Don't worry, back up, kid. One day, you'll get the leftovers too. He'd always wanted what I had, except I never had much. So when the villa surfaced as a bargaining chip, it made sense. It was about control, about being the one with the pen when I couldn't even hold it. I bundled everything, screen captures, notarization gaps, trust papers, backups of deleted messages, even Silas's email, and zipped it into a secured file. Sent it to Cassidy with a short note. Burn every word into court-ready ink. Her reply came within the hour. This isn't just shady, it's criminal. We prepared a counter cease and desist draft in case Quentin decided to keep lawyering up. Cassidy was meticulous, calm. But I knew the storm was coming. That night, close to 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Quentin. His voice sounded like it had been dipped in cheap regret. Maybe we should have told you earlier. He paused. I didn't want you to get hurt, man. You were recovering and you mean lied to. He didn't answer. So someone knew about the sale before you told me? Dead air. He changed the subject, talked about the weather, his kid's school project, but that voice crack, that stumble, was the tell. The kind you can't fake. That slip was confession, whether he meant it or not. The next morning I found another envelope under my door. Not thick, not threatening, just clean, white, too clean. Inside was a copy of a power of attorney. My name, my supposed signature. Dated 2 weeks before surgery, notarized. Problem was, I'd been under observation, barely able to lift a spoon. I wasn't walking, wasn't signing, wasn't present for anything but painkillers and IV lines. I stared at the document. That's when my hands stopped shaking. Not from fear, but purpose. If that paper was fake, then everything falls apart. The drive from my apartment to Cassidy's office felt longer than it was. My documents lay in the passenger seat, folders with every shred of proof I'd collected. Deeds, deleted messages, backups. My legs still trembled from walking, but I told myself that night was for seeing them face to face. I pushed open the law office door in downtown Austin. Cassidy sat behind her desk, lamp casting soft yellow light. She looked at me without surprise. That's what I liked about her, no false comfort. She laid out what I already kind of feared. The forged power of attorney didn't just invalidate the sale, it put Quentin in legal danger, felony fraud. She said my health, my emotions, they were what the family expected me to crawl back under. Cassidy's voice got firm. Sometimes people gamble on your kindness. Let's show them they bet wrong. We set a plan. A neutral cafe in Waco halfway between my place and theirs. Under the guise of discussing the estate, they believed that angle. I packed a hidden recorder in my coat pocket. I wrote out questions in my mind. So when did we decide I didn't need to know? Was I too dead for your conscience? Those words tasted bitter. I swallowed them, rehearsed letting my voice stay steady, no loose emotion. They'd pushed me into shadows long enough. The cafe was quiet. Early evening, soft light through the windows. My parents arrived, Mom smiling soft but eyes uneasy. Dad nodded from across the table. Quentin was not there. That blank seat hurt more than him showing up might. Mother asked if I was feeling better. Father fiddled with his ring, looked at me, and then away. I breathed deep, steady. I pulled a manila envelope from my bag. I placed it gently in front of them. Do you recognize this? I asked, voice low. Within, a copy of the forged document, signature, notarization claim. Mom's hands shook. Dad's eyes flared, then squinted. They offered excuses. We thought you'd understand. Quentin said it was for the best. I recorded them, every syllable. Cassidy's advice ringing, don't seek apology, seek confession. Later, my phone buzzed. An email from Silas's real estate broker, chain of forwarded messages mistakenly CC'd. One line stood out. Don't worry, my brother won't wake up for months. Quentin wrote that. I read it over and over. He assumed incapacity would buy him time. He assumed I'd stay quiet. This was proof of premeditation, not afterthought. That same night, as I sat in my apartment alone, Cassidy sent me another message. Someone else in the family got the email. There was a leak. Maybe Madeline. Maybe someone even closer. I looked at the empty seat in the cafe in my mind, felt the weight of their absence. Whispers in the house becoming louder. The game's not just dirty, it's cracking from within. Anonymous message popped onto my phone just as thunder rolled outside the lake house windows. A single line in the subject, M. I paused. Thought of Madeline, always near, never in. I tapped to open the shared drive link. My breath caught. Notarized documents, internal email chains, Proof Quentin used a fake notary stamp. One file showed signatures from my parents added after the villa was sold, not before. I stared, hand shaking. Betrayal wasn't just beyond legal. It was personal. Someone in my family was hiding, sabotaging, protecting someone else's lie. Was it Madeline? Cousin? Friend? Always neutral. But now someone had taken sides. I called Cassidy. Evening rain slicked the road as I drove toward the lake house. Windows of the car fogged from my anger in the dark. Cassidy waited on the porch, lamplight warm, welcome. She said what I already felt. This wasn't a fight in words anymore. We were bringing the cease and desist tonight. No more secrets. The plan was simple. Hand-deliver the legal packet. Record reactions. No yelling. Precision. I loaded the envelope into my coat, felt its weight. The storm sounded like judgment. We walked across the dock together. Quentin stood in the living room, lights low. His eyes flickered when he saw me. He said, "You were always too soft to hold on to anything that mattered." His words aimed to cut. I held the envelope steady. I laid it on the table. "This is what mattered to me," I said. "These," I nodded at the packet, "are the truth." Cassie beside me, watching, letting me lead. Quentin tried to deflect. "You don't understand business, this, that." But I didn't let him finish. Once I started, I didn't stop. Then a beep, sharp, mechanical from the kitchen. A flash. A screen. Cassidy turned toward a monitor hidden behind a bookshelf. Cameras, microphones. Quentin had wired the house. Hidden cameras all around. He was recording our meeting. "Admissible or not," he said with a half smile, "at least I'll have footage showing I didn't raise my voice." I felt the blood in my face stay. Cassidy stepped forward, power off. She pulled the SD card. Disabled the system. From anger, I felt clarity. This wasn't just about documents. This was about being watched, about being silenced, about trust broken beyond repair. I looked at Quentin. "Don't expect peace," I said. "The next time you hear from me, it'll be through court orders. No tears, no scream, just cold resolve." The sound of the storm outside echoed the storm inside me. I grabbed the legal packet, turned away. In Austin later, I filed for a restraining order. Fraud, surveillance, emotional harassment. The clerk stamped the papers. I carried the weight. That night, phone vibrates. Unknown number. I answered. Quentin's voice, shaky. "You really think this is over?" He sounded small. I looked at my reflection. I didn't feel small. I felt whole enough to speak. Morning came early, heavy with tension. I woke stiff, muscles tight from yesterday's confrontation. Legal packet in one hand, cease and desist papers in the other. I dressed with purpose. No hiding under loose shirts, no avoiding mirrors. Cassidy called just after sunrise. "Everything's ready," she said. Notarized copies, recorded conversations, emails with those discrepancies. She reminded me, "They built their story on your silence. It's your turn to speak." That line grounded me. I could feel resolve spreading through me like wildfire. By mid-morning, I was at the county clerk's office. The building smelled of old wood and too much proof. Over fluorescent lights, I asked for deeds, power of attorney logs, notary public records. At first, the clerk looked hesitant. Papers piled high, many requests. But when I laid down my documents, things shifted. They matched my originals against what was in their files. Deed used for sale had mismatched dates. Signatures didn't align. Notary logs missing names. I touched the back of my hand, adrenaline hot. Proof glowing under harsh lights felt like vindication in my veins. Later that day, I met Silas in a quiet cafe in Austin. He sat across from me, trying that old too-familiar calm. I slid the broker's emails across the table. Silas's name appeared as trusted intermediary, looped in email threads about selling. He looked at me like he thought it was some misunderstanding. I stayed calm, voice steady. I pointed at his own words. He stuttered. "Mistakes," he said. "Misunderstandings." I let him deal with those words while I pressed on. I recorded everything. His sweat, his pauses, his shifting gaze. That's when anger sharpened. Not blind rage, but the clarity that justice was finally within reach. When I got home, Cassidy called me with something heavier. She discovered Magnus Rowe had filed motions to suppress our deed filings, claiming erroneous notarization, while all along secretly assisting Quentin. And she found an email. Make sure the suppressed case reference is ready before they even see the counter. Betrayal from the legal side cut deeper than any sibling's silence. Magnus, the man trusted by both sides, working in shadows. My pulse pulsed loud. Shock and disillusionment merged in my chest. This wasn't just deceit. It was deception dressed as law. I didn't wait for guilt or apologies. I invited Mom, Dad, Rowena, and Madeline to the lake house. Quentin was absent. That chair meant more than his presence. I laid out public records, papers showing dates, notary logs, deception. I showed Magnus Rowe's email chain. I felt power in speaking. Mom trembled. Rowena's eyes glossed. Madeline nodded quietly. Father tried to speak, but I cut in. You had every chance to tell me. You chose silence. I demanded more than sorry. I demanded action, return of the deed, public acknowledgement, accountability. I felt sorrow for them, but fierceness for myself. Night fell. Later, I found an envelope at the gate, plain, white, typed inside, "You may think you own the house, but prove you own their hearts." Nostalgia dipped into bitterness, childhood scenes, false kindness, apologies never meant. The words felt like a challenge, thorns wrapped in silk. Holding it, I realized truth had opened the door, not fully, but enough to walk through. I found the voicemail when I plugged in my phone to charge that morning. Mom's voice, tinny and distant, but unmistakable. If anything ever happens to me, it's not what it looks like. You know what I own. My heart knocked. She knew. She wanted me to know. I sat there in the silence, replaying it so many times I could predict her pauses. I heard faint hospital room hum in the background, her breath catching. That recording was proof, something I needed more than anger. That evening I called everyone, Quentin, Mom, Dad, Rowena, Madeline, to meet at the villa. I walked in with stacks of printouts, the voicemail, the forged power of attorney, court filings. I laid them out on the old dining room table. Quentin tried to steer me away. Let's calm down. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. But I wasn't backing down. I quoted Mom. I showed them signatures that didn't match, ledger entries that were altered. One-party consent in Texas means the recording is legal. Mom's hands shook. Dad's face hardened. Quentin stuttered. Cassidy stood beside me when it came time for the ultimatum. She said the evidence was solid, the voicemail authentic, the filings validated. She told them, either you restore the deed publicly and issue a full statement, or we'll move forward with fraud charges and courtroom actions. The words hit like a hammer. Quentin's jaw clenched. Mother's eyes avoided mine. Father still silent. Someone in the room recorded when Quentin muttered something about covering mistakes. That moment will haunt him. The power of truth, sharp, loud, undeniable. A local news reporter reached out. Rumors had flown. I agreed to a live interview. On air, I said, "What do you think when people you love choose to erase you?" I played a snippet of Mom's voicemail. I held up the forged document in front of cameras. Viewers gasped. Some people called in support. Others expressed shock. Betrayal made public. My face lit by camera lights, heart pounding but voice steady. The stakes were no longer private. Later that night at a charity event Quentin hosted, Cassidy did something unexpected. She shared his original speech text with organizers. The speech Quentin delivered omitted lines that admitted his role. The printed copy laid out his shifting language. Guests compared versions. Cameras clicked. Whispers spread. The difference between what was said and what was meant spilled into the open, truth leaking into the cracks. Before I turned in, I got a call. A clerk's voice confirming the lawsuit was filed. The court date was set 2 months out. I held the phone, relief and dread mixed like acid in my gut. I walked into the villa's foyer and saw the ceramic mug, the one with my initials, HK, resting on a shelf. Even that reminds me of what was lost, what was reclaimed. 2 months, that's all the silence I'll ever allow. The courtroom was silent. Not the dramatic silence you see on TV, but the kind where no one breathes, no one even adjusts in their seat. I sat with my mother's old ring on my finger, worn, dull, familiar. It used to spin loose on her knuckle. Now it sat snug on mine, a reminder that she saw me when others didn't. The judge cleared his throat. The sale of the estate is declared invalid due to a forged power of attorney. The defendant, Quentin Kessler, is liable for full restitution. I barely registered the clack of the gavel. My breath caught at the word publicly. The title was officially restored. No more asterisks, no more loopholes, just mine. My hands rested flat on the table, palms sweating, but steady. Outside, the sun was too bright. Quentin walked off without a word. My parents trailed after him, like shadows clinging to a man who never once turned back. Rowena stood frozen for a second. Then she lowered her eyes and followed. I didn't chase any of them. A reporter shoved a mic at me. I looked past it. "You don't lose everything when the truth wins," I said. "You just learn what was never truly yours." An old neighbor I hadn't seen in years came up and gave me a quiet hug. That meant more than any ruling. Later that week, I returned to the villa alone. It felt stripped of its past. Furniture gone, curtains pulled. The echo of my shoes on the hardwood reminded me how hollow a place can be without warmth. I ran my fingers along the pantry doorframe. My height marks were still there, faded pencil lines, crooked and uneven. I sat in the backyard under that old oak tree where I used to imagine my life turning out different. Turns out it still could. Just not how I thought. Cassidy showed up with a coffee in one hand and something heavier in the other. "You need to see this," she said. An anonymous email had landed in her inbox mid-trial. Old bank records. Transfers. Quentin made years ago, right out of the transplant fund set up after Mom's surgery. She hadn't told me then, afraid it'd derail me. I stared at the numbers on the page, felt my stomach clench. I could have gone after him again, filed more motions, dug deeper. But I looked at Cassidy, folded the printout in half and said, "We're done." There wasn't a single drop of energy in me for another war. A week later, a letter arrived from a notary office in Oregon, hand-addressed, sealed in wax. Inside, a deed. To a cabin tucked away in the woods, my mother's childhood home, not listed in the estate, not mentioned in any of the manipulated wills, just hers, and now mine. Alongside the deed was a note in her handwriting. "Let them take the house they knew. I left you the home they never saw." I didn't cry right away. I held the paper to my chest. Let the silence wrap around me. "She believed in me all along," I whispered. And that meant more than anything I'd won in court. I turned down every interview after that. The noise wasn't worth it. I moved up to Oregon quietly. Slower life, fewer questions. On one morning just like this one, I sat on the porch with coffee in one hand, that letter framed beside me, birds chirping, sky clean. I looked out and thought, not about what they did, but what they couldn't touch. "It's not about what they took," I murmured. "It's about what they never got close enough to steal."